My sister ruined my life by assisting my ex-wife in making me pay child support for a child that wasn't even mine. I'll start by being totally upfront and saying that I can't stand my sister, though it wasn't always like this. She's my older sister, and growing up I really looked up to her. But over time she's shown me just how awful a sister she can be. So here's the deal. I was married to my ex-wife, Susie, for about 2 years when I found out she was cheating on me. I remember that moment like it was yesterday. I was just scrolling through her messages when I stumbled upon a chat where she was sexting with her male best friend of 8 years. Susie had always told me he was just a friend, someone who had been in her life forever. Despite sometimes feeling pangs of jealousy, I trusted her completely because our relationship was built on that trust. But seeing those explicit messages shattered everything. It felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. I confronted her and she immediately broke down, apologizing over and over. She swore it was a one-time thing and promised to block him, saying it would never happen again. Despite my anger and heartbreak, I wanted to believe her. We even started going to marriage counseling because I needed to understand why she did it and see if we could save our marriage. In therapy, Susie seemed genuinely sorry. She took full responsibility and worked hard to regain my trust. For a while, it felt like we were actually getting somewhere. She was attentive, transparent, and really putting in the effort to mend our relationship. So, I decided to stay and give our marriage another shot, because I still loved her and wanted to believe that people could change and relationships could heal. But, as you probably guessed, that was a huge mistake. After a while, I found out Susie was secretly trying to meet up with her guy friend again. One night, she told me she was going out with a coworker, but something felt off. Trusting my gut, I called the coworker after Susie left to check on their plans. To my dismay, the coworker had no idea what I was talking about. My heart sank. It was clear Susie was likely meeting up with her friend. I tried calling her multiple times that night, but she ignored every call. When she finally got home completely drunk, she didn't even acknowledge me and just stumbled past me to the bedroom. I felt invisible and utterly heartbroken, realizing she had become a stranger. Later, when I was about to go to bed, her phone buzzed with a message. Curiosity and dread got the best of me, so I checked it. It was him. The message read, "That was so much fun, we should do this more often," followed by some suggestive emojis. My heart sank even further. I felt sick, realizing my worst fears were probably true. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning, consumed by anxiety and heartbreak. By morning, I knew things would never be the same. When I confronted Susie, she tried to avoid taking responsibility, gaslighting me by saying my lack of trust was the real problem and that calling her coworker was an invasion of privacy. She called me paranoid and unreasonable. Her dismissiveness only fueled my determination to get the truth. I then played my last card, threatening to confront her friend directly if she didn't come clean. That seemed to hit a nerve. She got visibly anxious and tried to dissuade me. Finally, she broke down and admitted she had been wanting to see him for a long time and that they had made out after getting drunk. Her confession was like a punch in the gut. She tried to justify her actions by saying our marriage had become dull, but I pointed out that her cheating was what ruined things. I made it clear that her deceit had destroyed our trust, and that I couldn't just overlook her actions and pretend everything was okay. Realizing the gravity of her actions, I knew it was time to end things for good. When the situation blew up, she started pleading for forgiveness. She admitted she had problems, but begged me not to leave her, saying she was willing to work on herself and our relationship. Despite all her promises, I realized that our trust had been shattered beyond repair. The damage was too deep, and I eventually saw that staying together would only delay the inevitable. Her betrayal had gouged a rift we couldn't mend, and our marriage was in ruins. Accepting this, I made the toughest decision of my life and asked her to move out. Luckily, we had a prenup, which gave me some relief knowing I'd be protected from any financial fallout during our divorce. Even though she kept trying to get me to forgive her, and even got her friends involved, I stood my ground and kicked her out. I know it sounds harsh, but I was in so much pain. I had always thought we'd grow old together, but her betrayal left me devastated, and I knew it'd never be the same. I confided in my parents and my older sister, Na, about what had happened between Susie and me. They were shocked and dismayed. No one saw Susie's actions coming. They assured me they'd support me through the divorce, which was comforting. However, Na was unusually quiet, which I found odd. When I asked her what she thought, given her close relationship with Susie, she surprised me. Instead of addressing my feelings of betrayal, Na asked if I was sure about the divorce. She pointed out that Susie didn't have a family support system like I did. I was stunned. It seemed like she was more worried about Susie than the emotional turmoil I was enduring. I responded firmly, saying I didn't care about Susie's support system because she had chosen to betray me through her infidelity. I emphasized that Susie's well-being was no longer my concern, and questioned why Na seemed more concerned about my ex-wife than me, her own brother. Na Day fended herself, saying she was just worried about me and didn't want me to make any hasty decisions. She always thought Susie and I were meant for each other, and was still in shock about the divorce. She asked if it'd have any regrets down the line. While her response felt strange at the time, I didn't dwell on it much. The situation was already emotionally draining, so I focused on getting through the divorce. At first, everything seemed to be going well during the divorce proceedings, and my lawyer was confident we'd win. But then, Susie dropped a bombshell. She was pregnant. I was blindsided. It was something I hadn't seen coming at all. Clearly, life had different plans for me. After this news, Susie and her lawyer urged me to halt the divorce, arguing that we should try to work things out for the sake of our child. Susie insisted she wanted to give our child a traditional family upbringing. I was taken aback and immediately pushed back, saying I didn't care about her wishes anymore, and that there was no way this child could be mine. Susie argued back, saying she had never been intimate with anyone else but me. She insisted that making out with her male best friend didn't mean she could get pregnant from him. She kept urging me to think about what was best for our child and to fight for our marriage for the baby's sake. I refused to be swayed. I knew this was a desperate attempt to derail the divorce and guilt-trip me into staying with her so she could continue living a lavish life with my money. It was clear Susie was grasping at straws, and I remained resolute in ending the marriage. I insisted that after Susie gave birth, we'd get a paternity test to determine if the child was mine. But Susie's lawyer countered, claiming that since Susie was still legally married to me and hadn't been intimate with anyone else, I was automatically the father. They said they'd seek child support from me. My lawyer vehemently disagreed, pointing out that without a paternity test, such claims were baseless. Unfortunately, we know the legal system often falls short in protecting men in situations like these. In the following weeks, Susie's lawyer sued me for child support, presenting evidence that Susie hadn't been intimate with anyone else. They painted me as a controlling freak trying to dodge responsibility. They even brought in witnesses to testify on Susie's behalf. To my shock, one of the witnesses was my older sister, Na. I had no idea she would be there. Initially, I thought she was there to support me, but to my dismay, she testified against me. Na stated that she had been friends with Susie for a long time and was certain Susie couldn't have betrayed me by sleeping with someone else. She believed the child was mine. Hearing my own sister support my ex-wife over me was heartbreaking. Na knew firsthand how deeply Susie had hurt me, yet there she was, supporting Susie. Later, out of court, I confronted Na about her testimony. I expressed my shock and betrayal, feeling completely blindsided by her actions. Na stood by her decision, insisting she was doing what she believed was right and that I'd eventually appreciate her stance. I raised my voice in anger, disgusted at her for putting me in a position where I might have to pay child support for a child whose paternity wasn't even confirmed. Na argued that I shouldn't be cruel to an unborn child and that I needed to consider the financial difficulties Susie would face without any alimony and child support from me. I remember my sister telling me that I'd never get where she was coming from because I didn't have those maternal instincts women supposedly have. She pushed me to understand that paying for the kids' expenses was the least I could do. I felt totally exploited and deeply unsettled by her stance. I couldn't wrap my head around how she could put Susie's financial needs above my own emotional mess. My parents were also upset with her and told her she had no right to go behind my back and testify against me. But the damage was done. Her testimony made the court think Susie was telling the truth, and that I was just trying to dodge responsibility for our child. So the court ruled in favor of my ex-wife, granting her child support from me until the kid turned 18. I was furious and couldn't accept the judgment. Despite our best efforts, my lawyer and I couldn't change the court's decision. It's been a while now since my divorce from Susie, and I've continued to pay child support for her son every month even, though a paternity test confirmed he isn't mine. Legally, because Susie was pregnant while we were married, the child is considered my responsibility. So, I'm stuck paying until he's 18. This whole ordeal has made me even more resentful of my sister than my ex-wife. I blame Nina for trapping me in this mess. That's why I've kept my distance from her and ignored her at family events despite my parents' pleas to forgive her. Most of the family sides with me and keeps their distance from her too. Nina often complains to our parents about how I've isolated her, but her attempts to get sympathy don't work. The family sees her actions as foolish and supports my decision. Nina got married last year to her longtime boyfriend Joshua. Even though I got an invite, I didn't go. I later found out that many family members also skipped it, which really disappointed her. After she got married, she and her husband tried to get pregnant for a while. My parents were super excited about the prospect of a grandchild. Recently, I had to travel to a nearby town for a work conference. After the conference wrapped up, my co-workers and I decided to relax at the hotel bar. Imagine my surprise when I saw my sister sitting there with an older guy. She didn't notice me, and I made sure to stay hidden. I was curious about why she was in a bar late at night, especially since she's married. They looked really cozy, flirting and laughing. Without thinking too much, I took out my phone and snapped a few pictures. I made sure to get clear shots of both their faces as undeniable proof. My mind was racing. How could my married sister be in such a shady situation? I watched in disbelief as they seemed really comfortable with each other. After about an hour, the guy gestured for Nina to follow him to his room, and she did. I wanted to yell at her to stop, but knew from past experiences that cheaters never learn unless they're taught a lesson. When I got home, I decided to reach out directly to her husband, Joshua. He deserved to know the truth. I found him on Facebook and sent him a friend request. A few hours later, he accepted, and I messaged him, introducing myself as Nina's brother and explaining that we needed to talk. I asked him not to tell Nina about our conversation and gave him my phone number. He called me a few minutes later, curious why I had reached out. He knew about me from Nina and my parents, but was surprised I had contacted him. I apologized for missing their wedding and expressed regret that our first conversation had to happen under such circumstances. When he asked what was wrong, I shared what I had seen at the hotel. I didn't immediately call it cheating because I wasn't sure if they had an open marriage, but as I described the scene, he asked a bunch of questions about what Nina was wearing and who the guy was. To back up my story, I mentioned that I had taken photos. I sent them to him, and it was clear he was upset by the revelation, trying to process the gravity of the situation. After a brief pause, he thanked me for my honesty and asked why I would go out of my way to help him, considering we were basically strangers and I no longer had a relationship with Nina. His question struck a chord, and I shared my own experience of being cheated on by my ex-wife and how Nina had added to my pain by testifying against me. So here's the deal. I'm currently stuck paying child support for a kid who isn't even mine. After laying out my whole story, Joshua sat in silence for a bit. Then he told me that Nina had spun a completely different tale to him. According to her, Susie and I were already on the rocks, and we weren't even close anymore, so Susie made a one-time mistake which supposedly led to our divorce. Hearing this twisted version of events made me absolutely furious. I quickly set things straight with Joshua, explaining that Susie had actually cheated on me twice, which trashed our marriage and my trust in her. Thankfully, Joshua believed me and appreciated my honesty for exposing Nina's lies. He said he had no intention of sticking with a cheater and planned to talk to Nina about it. In the following days, my parents wouldn't stop calling to berate me for ruining Nina's life, as she was now facing a potential divorce. They blamed me for butting into her marriage and were mad about not getting any grandkids from her. I didn't hold back either. I countered by saying it wasn't my fault that their daughter couldn't stay faithful in her marriage. I told them that instead of obsessing over a grandchild, they should focus on teaching Nina better values and morals to become a better person. Nina also sent me a nasty text, calling me a spiteful little brat who couldn't mind his own business. She even suggested that Susie cheating on me was somehow justified and that I deserved everything that happened. Her message left me boiling with anger, and it took hours to calm down. But, in a twist of fate, I found out Nina is pregnant. She claims Joshua is the father, but he's refusing to take any responsibility. Joshua reached out, asking me to testify for him in court since I had those damning pictures of Nina with another man. I agreed right away, not just for revenge, but also because I felt bad for Joshua. I didn't want him to go through the same pain and betrayal I did with Susie. Since then, my parents and Nina have been relentless, begging me not to testify. They keep saying that family comes first, which I find super ironic since Nina didn't think of family when she screwed me over. I'm determined to teach her a lesson and ensure that Joshua doesn't suffer the same fate as me. Update 1. I'm really surprised by how divided people's reactions are to my post. Some women are even trying to convince me to support my sister, despite her clear infidelity. To them, I say shame on you. Believe me, I would have had no issues if my ex-wife had asked for child support after proving the child was mine. But no, she knew it wasn't my kid since we weren't even intimate at the time. So she knowingly made me liable for a child that wasn't mine because she couldn't afford it herself. I couldn't prove her affair with the other guy since I only had one text as evidence. So yeah, I do despise Nina for screwing me over and testifying for my ex-wife, but now that she's manipulating Joshua in the same way, I'm not standing by. I'm going to testify against her to make sure Joshua doesn't suffer like I did. If it turns out the kid is his, I'm sure he'll step up because he seems like a decent guy. But until that's confirmed, why should he be forced to pay child support when Nina's been sleeping around? She shows no remorse for her affair or for wrecking her marriage. Unlike my marriage, Joshua and Nina don't even have a prenup, so he might have to pay alimony too. On top of that, he shouldn't be forced to pay child support for a kid that isn't his. I believe I'm doing the right thing, and I'm glad the majority of comments under my post agree. Update 2. It's been a while, but today I testified against my sister in court. I laid out everything I saw her doing with the other guy and presented all the evidence and photos. I could feel her angry glare on me the whole time, but I didn't budge. Despite her lawyer trying to dismiss my testimony, claiming I held a grudge, the judge upheld its validity. I hope my testimony helps Joshua and that he won't be forced to pay child support. The results are still up in the air, though. During all this, my relationship with my parents has taken a nosedive. My mom called me, her voice choked with tears, after finding out I went through with my promise to testify against my sister. She was clearly disappointed and said she and Dad hoped I wouldn't do such a thing. Listening to her, I felt a surge of frustration. I reminded her how they never fought for me with such intensity when Nina did the same thing to me during my divorce. They even forgave her for everything. Yet here she was, calling me a disappointment, crying as if my struggles meant nothing compared to Nina's. I told my mom it was unfair to scold me for standing up for what's right, especially when they didn't support me before. It felt like a betrayal, and I made it clear I didn't need them in my life if they were going to prioritize my cheating sister over me. Since then, I've stopped talking to my parents and refused to take their calls or reply to their messages. Update 3. I'm back with another update on my sister's situation. I'm pleased. Hey everyone. I just wanted to share that Joshua got off the hook for paying child support to my sister. I bet Susie's really upset about it, but honestly, it gives me a bit of satisfaction. It's nice to see someone escape the unfair burden that so many, including myself, have had to deal with. I also want to clear up a few things since people keep asking me under my posts. For the last time. No, I don't have any relationship with Susie's son, even though I still pay child support for him. If the kid ever grows up and wants to reach out to me, I won't hesitate to tell him the truth about hi, Mom. Yes, my parents and I are still not talking. And to be honest, I feel much lighter and more relaxed without their constant calls accusing me of not supporting my sister. No, Susie won't confront me because she's still embarrassed after I testified against her. Also, yes, she will be getting alimony from Joshua, which we already knew. No, my parents don't have any relationship with Susie's son since they know he's not my child. And I have no idea if they're going to accept Nina's child either, but maybe they will. That's all I have to say.